Can you talk a little bit about Lahaina and why it is such a sort of hub, like a cultural hub and a place where there's such, embedded history for Kanaka Maoli people?
Absolutely. Lahaina, going back as far as we have documentation, which because of our chants that were passed down orally is thousands of years worth of mo'okuauhau or genealogy, and mo'olelo or stories about places that are significant and important to our people. And Lahaina is one of those places. Lahaina means the sweltering sun, but the original one of the older names of Lahaina is Lahaina Ikamalu Ulu Olele, and it's the place of the sheltering sun that's shaded by the flying breadfruit. So breadfruit is ulu. It's a major staple for Kanaka Maoli diet. It's incredibly nutritious, and it's being used all over the world now to promote food sovereignty in underserved populations that don't have food sovereignty. So nutritionally, it's very important, but culturally, it's incredibly significant. And we have this mo'olelo, this story about one of our deities, Ku. And you have to understand, for us, our deities are elements of nature and elements of the cosmos that provide life, that allow us to live in a place and survive there. So we have this deity, Ku, and one of his many forms, he has 70 plus different faces, but one of his forms was as a husband whose family was in famine, and he sacrificed his life, and they planted him in the ground, and the ulu tree came out of it. And he made this sacrifice so that his family could eat, so that they could be abundant for time immemorial. So the ulu tree is very sacred to Lahaina. And pre-contact, there were ulu trees all over Lahaina. There was a big grove of ulu trees that shaded. In our hydrology cycle, of course, the more trees we have, the more water goes up, the more rain we have. And Lahaina was also a very abundant place for rain and water. There was referred to as the Venice of the Pacific, which, I'm not crazy about usually using Western terminology, but that imagery lets people know that there was water. It was not the dry, barren place that you find Lahaina to be today. So because of that water, in Hawaiian thinking, the word for fresh water is vai, and the word for wealth is vai vai. So if you have a lot of water, you have wealth, you have abundance. Basically, it means you can live there. So because of this abundance, there were a lot of food crops. Aside from ulu, we had our traditional kalo plant. And our kalo plant is also part of our one of our creation stories. We have many, but one of our creation stories where the first child was stillborn, and was planted into the ground. And out of that came the kalo plant, again, to feed the next generations. So we see this theme about feeding being very, very important in our culture, because no water, no life, no food, no life. These are all the things that allowed us to exist in the most remote location in the world for over 1,000 years. So when you have all of this abundance in one location, it's a place that would attract the highest of the high in terms of our monarchs and our ali'i. So it was a place that our ali'i chose to make the seat of their kingdom and of their rulership, for lack of a better word. But going back as early as the 15th century to one of our great ali'i, Pi'ilani, who many of our roads are named after. Our major road is Honua Pi'ilani in Lahaina, named after the great King Pi'ilani, or great ali'i. We didn't have kings back then, but his family was seated there. And there was a very, very sacred area in what's now considered Lahaina town called Mokuhinia, which was a wetland, again, more water, and Moku'ula, which was an island situated in the middle of the wetland that folks often would take canoe or va'a to travel to. And some of our highest ali'i lived on Moku'ula, including all the way up to the kingdom period. It was actually the first capital of the kingdom of Hawaii when Kauikeauli, Kamehameha III, penned the first constitution for the Hawaiian kingdom, which was one of the prerequisites for allowing us into the League of Nations, to legitimize us by Western standards, which is, its own beauty and also problem in many, many ways. We can talk about that later. But it had what we call mana. Lahaina had mana. And mana is like a spiritual force. It's something that's palpable and tangible. It's something that we all have as human beings. But it's definitely something that exists in a place and in our aina. Aina means that which feeds. It's our land. And again, we go back to this theme of feeding, right? Because for people in the middle of the ocean, no food, no life. I mean, it's true for everybody, but we didn't have access as easily to other places to get food. So Lahaina, being this place of abundance, attracted our ali'i. And during the Pi'ilani kingdom, Pi'ilani had a daughter who was born as what we call e'epa, which means sort of special, gifted, connected to the spirit, maybe a channel. Some people might see that as, but definitely very, very manaful. And when she passed away, she was deified. There are ceremonies that transmute a human person into either an elemental deity or a deity that takes the form of something physical. And in this case, she took the form of a mo'o. Now, mo'o are, some people would say lizards. Some people compare them to dragons, but they're very, very powerful. They oftentimes live in the water. They can traverse underground through the lava tubes. They can go from island to island if they want to. But Kiha Wahine was very, very special. Carried so much mana and so much kapu, or sacred rules around her, that Kamehameha I, who united all of the islands and made us a kingdom, he carried her with him on that journey because she was so high and so sacred, along with his war god Kukailimoku. So Kiha Wahine, being that deity of such a heightened stature and so much mana, is part of what makes Lahaina so incredibly important to our culture, because she's still with us and she's still speaking through her descendants. In fact, since this situation, many descendants have spoken about the dreams they're having, the visions they're having about the return of Kiha Wahine. Maybe even in some respects, the wrath of Kiha Wahine, because what was done to her water systems, what was done to the cave systems and the karst systems that go underground, because of things like overdevelopment, theft of water, plantation, monocropping, the removal of all of our native plants and all of our native medicines that once existed in that place. And many of those things have been completely erased in true settler colonial fashion and replaced with tourism and big business and concretization of her home. So there's so many other things about Lahaina. It's such a rich historical place, but unfortunately what's happened because of settler colonialism in the past 130 years plus is people have come to know Lahaina as a tourist town. Before that, it was the sugar plantation town. Before that, it was a whalers town. And even in modern history, people still uphold, the narrative about this being this whaling town. And it was like such a fraction of time in our thousands of year history. But that's what gets promoted instead of our traditional Kanaka Maoli places, stories, people, and rich history.